So good evening on this last Tuesday in November 2021 when I'm recording this in my Facebook group. You may, of course, if you are watching this at a later time, you might be watching this in my YouTube channel, Peyton Principles Natural Health, or indeed as a podcast on my website. So however you are now tuning in to watch this, thank you for watching and listening to the information I've got to share with you tonight. I'm always interested in new topics that you'd like me to cover. I do Facebook Lives in my group every single week, which then go into my YouTube channel. And I'm always on the lookout for things that are of interest to you. So tonight, this has been a topic, someone asked me in particular to discuss these points tonight. And so that's why I'm covering it. And I was only asked about a couple of weeks ago. And so I'd always like to know exactly what it is that you'd like to hear from me. So please let me know by emailing me, caroline@peytonprinciples.com, sending me a direct message, however you can get a message to me, please do that. So the purpose of these always is to provide some really straightforward, useful advice that you can easily implement into your day-to-day life. I'm not about giving complicated advice. It's all about keeping things simple, because at the end of the day, if we don't keep things simple, you're not going to make the changes and implement it, and it's a bit of a waste of time, if I'm honest. And things don't need to be complicated. That's what I've learned. The whole nature of the way I practice is to try and keep my advice as simple as I possibly can. So my lives, I try and do it in under 20 minutes. Ideally, I'd like to do it for 15. I know your time is precious. Sometimes I do run a little bit over, so forgive me if I do, but I'm often trying to cover too much information. So tonight I'm talking about foods that can help to keep your hormones in balance. And yes, this is aimed specifically at ladies tonight, although a lot of what I talk about isn't for ladies, it's for men as well. And although my group here it said it's mostly for females, that is not the case. I'm sure men that are in my group will know that I give a lot of information that's relevant to men as well as women. So talking about hormones, from the time of your mid-30s, your hormones start to change. So we don't tend to think about, and I don't want to just focus this actually on the menopause, and that's why I start with this description. But we sort of, when we get to the menopause and start to experience more extreme symptoms, that's the point we start to take action. And one thing I'd like to get across to you younger ladies tonight is that it's never too early to start focusing on the foods that help to keep your hormones in balance. So it's really from your mid to late 30s onwards is the time that you can really start to take some proactive action. If you're older than that, if you're suffering quite severely with menopausal symptoms, then equally it's never too late to start implementing some of the information I'm going to give you tonight. I don't think there's information here that some of it you won't have heard of before, but I think some of it you will, but you may not have heard of it in the way I describe it. And so hopefully I'm going to make it more meaningful for you. So of course, going through the hormonal changes, we go through the perimenopause to the menopause to the postmenopause. And some women are struggling for years, and that's just not a great place to be with hormonal symptoms. So what you eat can make a huge difference, which is what I'm going to go on and talk about. But a couple of weeks ago, or it might have been a little bit more than that actually, now it was during October, which was sort of Menopause Awareness Month. I gave a talk here. I've also got a blog that's on my website, which is about alleviating menopausal symptoms without reaching for HRT. I didn't ditch HRT. I was just giving you other ways to manage it. So if you want a more in-depth view about this, then please take a look at that blog post, or again, my YouTube channel, Peyton Principles, Natural Health, or the podcast. So I'm focusing here tonight to talk about just about the foods. And it's really important that we think about eating these foods in abundance. I think often we think about tinkering around the edges with some of these foods, a little bit here and maybe a little bit there. And you might try just one of these things and then you might not think that works very well. It's about an abundance of these things. It's not just isolating one food or one type of food that I'm going to go on to talk about. It's an abundance and trying to capture as much of this into your diet as possible. So the first bit I'm going to talk about is phytoestrogens. You've probably heard of that word. You may not know what it actually means. Phyto is the Greek word for plant, and so therefore phytoestrogens is for plant based foods, compounds that mimic estrogen. And what they actually do in the body, in the female body and in the male body as well, is they latch on to our estrogen receptors on the cells. They latch onto those, and what they do is they're going to exert a very gentle estrogenic effect. That's what phytoestrogens do. They also, for those of you who may be listening to this thinking about, it's not through the menopause, I think I've got what's known as an estrogen dominance in the body. Well, phytoestrogens have also been found to what we call modulate that approach as well. So by latching onto these receptors and by giving a gentle estrogenic effect, it stops more stronger, harmful estrogen exerting too much of an influence, if that is what's happening to you. So phytoestrogens are very, very helpful. As I said, they're plant-based compounds. They latch onto our natural estrogen receptors and provide a very gentle form of estrogen that the body can then respond to. Now, I don't think there's any one food that's better than another. I think it's so important that to try and consume as many of these foods into your diet as you possibly can. As I said, don't just try one and then ditch it and then try another. And, I'm going to go on and talk about flax seeds, a little bit of teaspoon here. It's just not enough. And the more severe you experience symptoms, the more you may need to think about boosting levels of these even more. So what works for one is not necessarily going to work for another. We're all unique individuals. We all have different genetic traits and inherited traits and different lifestyles that are all going to be affecting us in different ways. So eat as many of these foods as you can and think about rotating them as well so that they're consistently in your diet as much as possible. So the first one I'm going to mention is soya. It's a well-known isoflavone. That's a very well-known phytoestrogen. But the one thing I'd like to get across here is that in the Western world, we consume and focus far too much on the Western processed soya, the soya milks and the soya yogurt and even tofu. They're very much processed forms of soya. And I think we need to be getting away from that. And I think we need to focus more on what they eat in Japan and the Far East, which are fermented forms of soya. These are the ones that have been shown in the Far East. Women in the Far East eating this natural diet don't experience the same sort of menopausal symptoms that we do. So I think we need to be focusing more on the natural forms of estrogen that are used in the Far East, which are the fermented forms. That's natto, tempeh, and miso. They are stronger, it's because they're fermented, but they're the ones I think are going to be better personally. And the other reason why I find this really important is that the non-fermented, the ones we tend to eat in the Western world, have higher levels of phytic acid and oxalic acid. I'm not going to go into more details about what they are, but what I do know about these is that in the gut, they bind to our minerals like calcium, magnesium, iron, and zinc. They bind to them and they can excrete them from the body. So it's going to make it more difficult for you to absorb your minerals. So you can have the best diet in the world, but you may be lacking some of these minerals if you eat and consume too much non-fermented soya. So that's another reason for focusing more on the fermented soya. So that's one of the more well-known phytoestrogens. Other good sources of phytoestrogens are flax seeds, celery, sesame seeds, sunflower seeds, chickpeas, lentils, and peas. I've written here that I love hummus because I think it's like a double win. Well, I just love hummus anyway. I'm always eating it, but it's got the sesame seeds and the chickpeas in it. And if you eat it, I used to always eat lots of celery dipped in hummus, and then you've got another phytoestrogen. So that's brilliant. I would just like to give another view about eating flax seeds. So some of you may think, well, I eat lots of flax seeds. You might be buying the whole ones. One thing I would say about whole flax seeds is they're so tiny that the ability for your body to digest them and extract the nutrients from them is really, really difficult. Whole flax seeds are a fantastic source of fiber. So if you're looking for supporting elimination in the gut, keeping the bowels healthy, brilliant. But if you're trying to extract nutrients from flax seeds, I always go for the ground ones, the milled ones. I'm a big fan of Linwood's ground flax seeds. Come with other nuts and seeds alongside it. And that way, the fact that they're ground is that the hard work of extracting the nutrients has already been done for you. When I buy these, you keep them in the sealed packets and you keep them in the fridge. Or if you've got a coffee grinder, you could grind them fresh yourself. That way you're protecting these the valuable fats that are in the flax seeds as well. So there's a couple of things about soya that I recommend and around flax seeds. The next thing I want to talk about is around cruciferous vegetables. This was something that was particularly raised and hence what sparked me to do this post tonight. Now, cruciferous vegetables, and I'll explain the ones to look out for in a moment. Cruciferous vegetables contain another phytonutrient. Our plants are full of phytonutrients with complicated names. Another reason why we need to consume so many in our diet, because they're just full of nutritional goodness. So phytonutrients are things that help protect the plants, but confer their goodness onto us. So a phytonutrient in plant is called indole 3-carbinol. Little bit of science here, just very briefly. That gets converted by stomach acid in our body to something that's known as DIM. You can buy supplements as DIM. Now, DIM has been found to help healthy hormonal balance and metabolism. So when you're eating cruciferous vegetables, and I advise them to be eaten cooked rather than raw, it's going to help extract this indole 3-carbinol that with good stomach acid levels will get converted into DIM. Most people are unaware. A little bit of explanation more about estrogen. You know, we think about estrogen, but we then don't think about what happens to estrogen. It has to be metabolized through the liver, and it has to go through various pathways and be extracted out of the body. What most people are unaware of is that there are different forms of this metabolized estrogen, and some of them can be quite harmful, more potent and more harmful to the body. There's different forms with long names. I'm not going to go into that. But what has been found is that DIM helps to stimulate the less potent and safer form of estrogen, which is really important for helping to keep hormones in balance. It's also been found that these metabolites can help to contribute to the perimenopausal symptoms of mood swings, headaches, hot flashes, and poor sleep. So I think cruciferous vegetables need to be, again, really high up in your diet. I'm always banging on about the dark green leafy vegetables. And cruciferous vegetables specifically are your broccoli, your Brussels sprouts, your cabbage, your kale, your collard greens, bok choy, watercress, and horseradish, cauliflower as well. That's another really important cruciferous vegetables. These should form part of your diet every day. You know, we should be eating half a plate of vegetables. So make sure you get some of these into your diet, ideally cooked every single day. I believe the cooked versions, it's all to do with digestion. And when you eat cooked vegetables, the sort of breaking down of those really tough plant cell walls is partly been done for you because we struggle to do that as humans. So I believe cooked vegetables are better. Now, supplementing DIM, for those of you who think maybe DIM might be something I could try, you know, I don't necessarily like dark green leafy vegetables, these cruciferous ones. I'm going to think about supplementing this thing called DIM, which you can do. All the research I found around this is that it is safe. You know, there's been some concerns about, is it going to provide too much of a stimulatory estrogenic effect? What if I've had cancer? I cannot find any research around that. I've looked really hard around it. If anything, I found the opposite. And the supplements, and I only ever recommend the best quality professional supplements out there. There are no safety warnings alongside that. Of course, with most supplements, they say don't have them if you're breastfeeding or pregnant, and you wouldn't want to put any hormonal additional support burden on the body if you are pregnant. But, you know, if we're looking at this as later in life, then there are no safety warnings around DIM at all. Just going back to this thing around, how your body metabolizes hormones. For those that I just mentioned this now, for those who want to understand more about hormones, I use in my practice a fantastic hormonal test called the Dutch test that looks at estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, DHEA, and it looks at all these different types of metabolites and what your body is doing with it. It looks at cortisol, it looks at melatonin. It's remarkable and fantastic. So if any of you wanted to know more about this test that can really pinpoint exactly what is going on in your body right now, whether you've got the right levels of hormones for where you are at your life stage, then, you know, do ping me a message to find out more. So going back to the foods, the last bit I want to talk about is the gut microbiome and gut elimination from foods. How could I not end a talk by getting on to talking about the gut, because I talk about it so much. So we know that the gut bacteria, I know the gut bacteria influences every aspect of our health. And it is important for estrogen metabolism as well. So there's so many different types of beneficial gut bacteria, but certain strains are going to help metabolize estrogen. And there's been research to show that when we start to study the gut microbiome, and if there's a lack of diversity of the good bacteria and an overall lack of abundance of, you know, we need a lot of them, then it can affect levels of estrogen in the body. So, you know, these microbes are communicating with all aspects of the body all the time, and we're discovering different unique sets of the microbiome. Again, another test I do, another subset of that they do is vaginal microbiome testing, and it's really, really fascinating. So we know the gut microbes are hugely important. We're now beginning to understand how it influences how your body is metabolizing estrogen, and equally how it can be linked to lower levels of estrogen in the body. So what can we do about that? Well, an easy way from a food point of view is to think about your fermented foods: kefir, sauerkraut, kombucha, kimchi. They're all useful additions to have in your diet, to eat as a sort of general part and parcel of your life, to gently help to maintain levels of what's going on. I'm not going to say that these probiotic fermented foods are going to naturally raise levels, but they're very, very good as maintenance and to help to keep things more in balance. So I love foods like that for that purpose. But going back to the elimination, this is where we need to come back to thinking about how we support a healthy gut elimination. You know, thinking about your bowel movements. Are they good? Are they daily? Do you know how quickly food is passing through you? Are your bowels sluggish? Forget 5 a day. We really must be thinking about 10 a day. And that should come mostly from vegetable sources, a little bit of fruit, berries, small apples, the less sweet ones, some pears, maybe plums. We need to be careful with our fruit because of the sugar content. It's not that you can't have fruit, but when I think about 10 a day, I'm thinking about the vast array of vegetables that we have available to us. Yes, we should try and eat more seasonally, but, you know, do look at what's in the supermarket and reach out for those things that never go into your basket and try different things out. Alongside that, thinking about your herbs, thinking about your spices, thinking about your plant sources of proteins, your pulses and your lentils and your nuts and your seeds. These are also good sources of fiber, as well as being good sources of protein and nuts and seeds for the fats as well. So that's what I wanted to talk about in a simple way of how you can choose foods that can help to keep your hormones in balance. Do look out, as I said, for my other article and my lives videos, which was called Alleviating Menopausal Symptoms Without Reaching for HRT, which covers a lot of other aspects of how we holistically take care of our hormone health. Because at the end of the day, it is this whole holistic approach that we need to consider. So yeah, I'm pretty bang on up to my 20-minute marker. Thank you for listening. I hope you found that interesting. And please, please, please let me know if there's any other topics you'd like me to cover. I'm here every Tuesday night, 6 o'clock, nearly every week, unless I'm on holiday or I'm called away for something urgent. As I said, I've now done 100, or I might have just said at the start, but I've done over 100 lives now. So I'm always interested to know exactly what it is that you'd like me to explain to you, and I'm very happy to deliver this in another one of my Tuesday lives. Thanks for watching. Have a lovely evening. Have a great week ahead. Thanks everyone. Bye.